For 7 days, Hawaii disappears from America's reach, not with explosions, not with war, but with silence. Flights stop first, quietly removed from departure boards as if it's temporary, as if it will fix itself. Cargo ships slow, then stall somewhere beyond the horizon, and suddenly the most remote state in the United States becomes something else entirely, an island nation with no notice. At first, life continues almost normally. Beaches are still full, hotels still glowing at night, but beneath that calm, systems are already straining. Hawaii imports nearly everything it consumes: food, fuel, medicine, and when the mainland connection snaps, even briefly, the clock starts ticking. Within 48 hours, supermarkets feel different. Shelves thin out faster than expected, not because of chaos yet, but because people sense something fragile has been exposed. Gas stations begin rationing as fuel deliveries fail to arrive, and electricity planners quietly calculate how long reserves can last if nothing moves in or out. By the third day, tourism collapses in real time. Visitors realize they are stuck, airlines offer no answers, and an economy built around constant movement freezes. Military bases shift posture, not to attack, but to secure, because Hawaii is not just a paradise, it is the center of American power in the Pacific, and isolation changes how that power looks to the rest of the world. By the 5th day, hospitals start prioritizing supplies, pharmacies ration medicine, and the question is no longer comfort, but continuity. Can the grid hold? Can water treatment continue without fuel? Can order survive when reassurance is gone? Across the Pacific, other nations are watching closely because Hawaii is proof of reach, of logistics, of control. And for the first time in decades, that proof looks uncertain. No enemy has fired a shot, yet pressure builds everywhere at once, on civilians, on infrastructure, on the idea that help is always guaranteed. And as the 7th day arrives, the most unsettling realization settles in. This isn't about Hawaii alone. It's about how modern societies depend on invisible connections, and how quickly strength turns into vulnerability when distance takes over. The question isn't whether America would respond. The question is how the world would remember those 7 days, when one of the most strategic places on Earth stood alone, and everyone saw what isolation really costs. And as that realization spreads, time itself begins to feel heavier on the islands. By the end of the first week, the problem is no longer panic or fear, but endurance. Every system that once relied on constant resupply now operates on calculations measured in hours instead of weeks. Power plants adjust output, knowing that fuel is finite. Cargo ports sit silent, their cranes frozen like monuments to a global network that has suddenly failed. Even communication takes on a different tone. Official statements become careful, restrained, designed to prevent panic rather than explain the full reality. Ordinary life shrinks. Schools close not because of danger, but because transport, food services, and staffing can no longer be guaranteed. Restaurants simplify menus or shut their doors entirely, revealing how thin the line is between abundance and scarcity in a place surrounded by ocean. As days stretch on, the psychological shift becomes impossible to ignore. Hawaii has always been distant from the mainland, but distance has never felt like separation until now. The ocean, once a symbol of beauty and protection, becomes a barrier with no bridge. Residents begin to understand something deeper, that isolation is not dramatic or explosive, but quiet and exhausting. There are no sirens, no battles, just the slow realization that help is not on the way yet. Community networks grow stronger out of necessity, neighbors sharing resources and information, while authorities balance transparency with stability. The military presence, normally reassuring, takes on a new meaning. Its role is not rescue, but deterrence and order, a signal to the world that even isolated, Hawaii still matters. Yet that signal is being tested not by force, but by time. Beyond the islands, the global reaction begins to form. Markets quietly adjust, analysts debate what this isolation reveals about supply chains and strategic vulnerability, and foreign observers ask an uncomfortable question. If a place as important as Hawaii can be cut off, even temporarily, what does that say about the modern world's resilience? The Pacific has always been a theater of power, and Hawaii sits at its center. For decades, its value came from connection, runways, ports, cables, logistics. Now its value is being measured by how it survives without them. The absence of chaos becomes its own message, but so does every sign of strain. Every delayed shipment, every rationed resource, every carefully worded announcement becomes part of a global lesson unfolding in real time. As the second week looms in people's minds, even if the scenario is meant to last only 7 days, planning extends beyond the original timeline. Contingency replaces routine. The question shifts from "when will this end" to "what if it doesn't?" That shift is where interest locks in, because it forces a confrontation with reality rather than imagination. This is not a fantasy collapse. It is a stress test of modern civilization compressed into a single place. Hawaii becomes a mirror, reflecting how dependent strength is on flow and how quickly control fades when flow stops. When the mainland connection finally returns, whenever it does, relief will follow. But it will not erase the memory, because for those 7 days, the illusion of constant support was broken, and once seen, that fragility cannot be unseen. And even as the countdown toward reconnection continues, the deeper consequences are already unfolding beneath the surface. The absence of immediate collapse does not mean stability, it means restraint, discipline, and systems stretched to their absolute limits. Every decision becomes a trade-off. Do you keep fuel for hospitals or for power plants that keep communication alive? Do you preserve supplies for the coming days, or release them now to maintain public calm? These are not dramatic choices made in front of cameras, but quiet calculations made behind closed doors, and that silence is where the real tension lives. Hawaii is no longer just functioning, it is surviving, and survival strips away assumptions faster than any crisis headline ever could. As isolation continues, the economy begins to feel the weight of stillness. Tourism, once the island's lifeblood, becomes irrelevant almost overnight. Hotels turn dark floor by floor, airports echo with emptiness, and thousands of workers are sent home with no clarity about when normal life will resume. The rhythm of the islands changes. Nights grow quieter, not because of peace, but because motion itself has slowed. For a place defined by movement, people arriving, goods flowing, fuel cycling through ports, this pause feels unnatural, and in that pause, people start to ask questions that were never necessary before. How long can an island that imports nearly everything sustain itself? How quickly does prosperity dissolve when connection breaks? Inside command centers and emergency offices, the tone becomes colder, more analytical. This is no longer about comfort or optics, it is about continuity. Power grids are monitored hour by hour, water treatment facilities depend on chemicals that arrive by ship, medical systems rely on just-in-time delivery. Each passing day without resupply increases the margin of error, and margins are where systems fail. Nothing dramatic happens, and that is precisely what makes it unsettling. Collapse does not announce itself, it creeps forward, disguised as control, until one small failure triggers another. The island becomes a case study in how modern societies balance efficiency against resilience, and how rarely resilience truly wins. Far beyond Hawaii, the scenario quietly reshapes strategic thinking. Allies observe, rivals calculate. Hawaii is not just land, it is a signal, a platform, a guarantee of reach across the Pacific. If that platform can be isolated without conflict, then power itself looks different. Deterrence is not only about weapons, but about logistics, and logistics depend on uninterrupted flow. The world does not panic, but it takes notes. Every hour Hawaii remains cut off adds weight to an uncomfortable truth. Global strength is more fragile than it appears, and geography still matters more than technology wants to admit. By the time the seventh day approaches, the tension is no longer about whether society will hold, it's about what will change forever once it does. Even if ships return and flights resume, the knowledge remains. Residents will remember how quickly shelves emptied, how carefully fuel was guarded, how silence replaced certainty. Institutions will remember how close they came to thresholds they never expected to face. And viewers are left with a final, unsettling realization. This was not a disaster scenario. This was a delay, a pause, a moment where the system was simply interrupted. If 7 days can expose this much vulnerability, the real question is no longer about Hawaii, it's about how prepared the modern world truly is when connection, its greatest strength, suddenly disappears.